We felt that robo-advisory services were coming up, claiming to replace financial advisors. And that was something that we felt we didn't really align with that sort of vision. We felt that human-to-human interactions were still really important. Generally, people are irrational when it comes to investing, and that's where that human connection is really important. We called ourselves CoPilot because we didn't want to replace the pilot. We just wanted to be a supporting sort of actor in this, right?
I'm Jake here in Villarreal, born and raised in Silicon Valley, and here to take you behind the scenes to show what it's like to be a startup founder, the journey they're on, the problems they face, and the products they build in an effort to transform industries. I'm excited to have with us today Jesse Chen, co-founder and CEO of CoPilot. Jesse, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jake.
Great. Well, let me give you a little background of Jesse. He is a first-generation immigrant in Canada. He graduated at the University of British Columbia with a computer science degree and spent 8 years working on FIFA at Electric Arts. He started CoPilot AI together with his best friend, Henry B., as a fintech company. CoPilot AI has since then pivoted to the sales tech space and is focused on innovating the way people grow their businesses. Before we jump in here, Jesse, whereabouts are you calling in from Canada?
I'm calling in from Vancouver, BC, as they call beautiful British Columbia.
When I started this podcast, I had this vision to go behind the scenes to share what it's like to be a startup founder in Silicon Valley, where I'm born and raised. And weekly, we dive deep in the trenches to find the wins, the losses, and the lessons learned, with the hopes that it helps you run a better startup. But here's the thing. If you've gotten any value out of these conversations or been inspired at all, hit the subscribe button. And I get it. Your podcast feed's probably overflowing. But to stay up to date what's going on in Silicon Valley, stick with us. Because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to build something that matters. And we're better when we do it together. So hit that subscribe button and follow us wherever you find your podcasts. Now, let's get back to the show. I love that area and spent a lot of time skiing those mountains. So really cool to have you with us today. Before we jump in and talk about CoPilot, which I think is a fascinating story, give us a little background of your origin story. How did you get into technology and the whole startup ecosystem space?
Sure. So, as you've already mentioned, I'm a first-generation immigrant. I immigrated here together with my dad in the very early 90s. He came here to do his PhD. At that time, it was really only students that were able to immigrate out of China. And so I was, lucky enough to be able to come here together with him. And I think that plays a big part in kind of my sort of cultural upbringing, my values. So as like poor immigrants at the time, I kind of saw my parents having to work multiple jobs while going to school just to keep the lights on. For example, my dad and mom, they were dishwashers, at restaurants, right, part-time. And growing up, I didn't get a lot of like new things. Everything was secondhand, yard sale, or whatnot. So that kind of plays a big part. When I went to university, computer science was something that I naturally gravitated towards. My dad was big into tech as well and computers. So, we saved up a lot of, like, not buying new things was really him saving up to buy himself a 486 computer back then, the old computers with the turbo buttons.
Oh, yeah.
So, that was what kind of got me into tech. So when I went to university, it was straight to computer science. And the co-op program played a really big part as well in kind of getting me into the industry really quickly. When I graduated, I didn't really think about going into, master's or PhD like my dad. I just wanted to just start working, start contributing. And, my first job was actually not at Electronic Arts. It was at this local company that did technology for military tech. Being a first-generation immigrant and from China, I was actually not security cleared for a lot of the projects, given that they were U.S. contracts. And so, as part of the 2008 financial crisis, I was laid off, and that kind of jump-started this sort of interest or the entrepreneur journey, so to speak. So I did that part-time while working full-time at Electronic Arts.
Yeah, that's great. It's always good to have that sort of two-lane opportunity where you have a full-time job, but you can also start to innovate on the side, and you never know where it leads. I think your story is fascinating because you started the company or the side hustle project, 2008-ish, and you really went through a fairly long process of that first iteration of the company, and then you made a pivot into the company you have today. a few years back. We'll talk about that, but I guess, you know, I want to start off with just the name of your company, which I think is fascinating. It's Copilot AI, and in today's world, you think, okay, that must be Microsoft's product. It might be, connected to Chat GPT. Like just the brand name itself must bring you tons of visibility. Just curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, for sure. So we've definitely been asked that before. We haven't been really sort of originally when we actually came up with the name, it was because we wanted to be an AI company, but we felt that this was back when we were fintech. Robo advisory services were coming up, claiming to replace financial advisors, and that was something that we felt we didn't really align with that sort of vision. We felt that human to human interactions were still really important, and generally people are irrational when it comes to investing, and that's where that human connection is really important. So we called ourselves Copilot because we didn't want to replace the pilot. We just wanted to be a supporting sort of actor in this, right? And this was back in 2016, 2017. So before the ChatGPT craze, before the Microsoft Copilot craze. And you're right. You're absolutely right. We get confused with Microsoft a lot. When they had their Super Bowl ad, it drove 10x our web traffic. So we're definitely benefiting from it. Yeah.
Just a side note, I had a friend of mine who had started a company that was named its company close to an Apple product. And that Apple product ended up becoming well known today. But he ended up getting into a confrontation with Apple and ended up getting millions of dollars because of the naming rights. So I don't know what your structure is. I know it's different in the US versus Canada, but you never know what comes out of it. Maybe there's a huge value in just your company name. You never
I
know.
can I can actually give some insight to that. So we did do apply for a trademark, and we submitted that application a long time ago. And recently, it came back. They've got concerns about the application because Copilot is used so broadly now by so many people. It's not just Microsoft, right? So everyone's calling some sort of assistance AI as a Copilot now. And so their concern is that it's just such a broadly used term that it isn't very specific enough. So I'm not too necessarily concerned about Microsoft necessarily, you know, coming into conflict with us or us coming into conflict with them. Primarily because if they get trademarks, it would have to be trademarked as Microsoft Office Copilot or Microsoft 365 Copilot, whatever. It cannot just be Copilot, right?
Yeah, gotcha. Interesting. Well, let's talk a little bit about your company. So, when we look in the market, oftentimes you're solving a problem, and that problem is valuable enough where companies will pay for that service or product. What did you see in the market that you thought was worth building your company around, and what problem are you solving today?
Sure. So a lot of this comes from the history of the company. We were previously a fintech company. We interacted a lot with financial advisors, and that's what kind of gave us that insight into, hey, what really matters. And it's one of the oldest industries in the world, and that is really sales, right? Driving business growth. If you're a business, a big part of your budget is spent towards driving business development, right? And so that was a problem that I guess there's a lot of solutions already out there. However, the solutions have all been pretty, I would say, stale. If you look at sales historically, going from the salesman, the traveling salesman that knocks on doors, to the telemarketer that calls on the phones, now to email, the outbound prospecting world, it hasn't really changed that much. And so that's something that we're kind of tackling head on, and it's a problem that is a huge market right now when it comes to how much money is being spent.
So, when you talk about carving out your niche, what's the focus? Is it on the digital outreach with messaging through email or SMS? Like, when for the listeners that are hearing this story, what's the product that they would purchase if they used your platform?
Sure. When we first started, it was primarily digital and it was tied to automation. We've kind of been shifting more towards a quality over a quantity approach. That's kind of been the ethos, so to speak. We look at it as less so about how many people you touch and more rather the quality of the people, of the prospects, and do they actually want you to prospect them. So it comes to solving who you prospect, when's the best time, what do you say, and how you say it, right?
Is it like a script that you would reach out to and read through and know that it's an optimized script based on your data? Or is it a combination of outreach through an email, and then once you get someone on a call, you know how to communicate with them, you know what their needs are, and kind of walk us through the solution so we can visualize what it is.
Sure. So everyone already knows email automation. Part of it is coming up with templates. Copilot, we do messaging automation. We also do, as part of the quality over quantity approach, we do communication style predictions. And as an example, I've actually got your profile up over here, and I have ran our model on you, and you can tell me whether or not this is somewhat accurate on point spot on, or is it way off. So what our model says about you, Jake, is that you are a thinker when it comes to your communication style. So what that means is you're data backed, you're detail oriented, and you're logic driven, right? And so that is, that's the communication style that the model has predicted. And so what we then do with that is we can have message templates that are based on this communication style. When I'm meeting with you, it's got do's and don'ts of what I should be doing. I should be focusing on being data driven and having logical conversations with room for detail and providing proof through demos, which is exactly what I'm doing right now. So let me know if that's an example, if that's a fairly accurate example.
Yeah, sounds very accurate. That's amazing. So how would I use that data?
So then with this, it's if you've got a meeting or if you want to send an email messaging, it's like what you should do. Provide facts, statistics, or thought-provoking questions. We provide templates such as, hi, Jake, thank you for the connection. I've read some of your articles about, and then a topic that's there, and appreciate the depth of research. How do you see this trend evolving? And then you use that as a way to then start a conversation. So that answers the what do you say portion of the four that I mentioned earlier.
Got it. So it looks at someone's profile and then can give you insights about how that person wants to be communicated to. And
Or
so
not
you're
less so wants to be communicated to, but more so what is a more effective way to communicate with
okay.
them rather than just being a generic, oh, this is the
Right.
template I use for everyone, and insert
Right.
this is your industry, and insert, this is what I'd like to talk to you about. But more so, if you're a thinker, then I want to actually talk about an article that you wrote about, right? And
Okay.
but if you
Yeah.
were a relator, then I need to talk about what are some of our shared interests. And if you were a director, what do I want to just get to the point, tell you what I want to do, tell you what the purpose of the outreach is, things like that.
Got it. So how do you gather the data, and is it AI that's processing it and telling you based on what the data that you capture is going to predict?
It's a bit like a Myers-Briggs assessment, but in
Okay.
this case, we look at your bio, we look at your kind of education history, your work history. If we don't have that information, what's also very useful is if I have previous correspondence with you, or if you've got a bunch of podcasts, if I can get the transcripts for that, I can actually feed that in and get an idea of what kind of a communication style would best suit interacting with you.
That's great. Why is this space important to you?
A great question. This is a question I had to ask myself and answer because, as you know, I mentioned the pivot from fintech to this space, and as a computer scientist or as an engineer, I wasn't necessarily that interested initially, but I kind of look at it as what I'm actually really frustrated with, which is spam. Right? I hate getting spam. I hate getting cold calls. Emails that reach out, and it's just a big list of people that are trying to get me to spend money. And ultimately, I understand how important, as a founder myself, I understand how important it is for businesses to be able to grow and drive business development. So the problem is real, and I myself have my own problems. Like I do have problems that need solutions, and so there are actually some outreaches that I think will actually get my attention and get me to spend. But ultimately, the approach right now is very much a spray and pray shotgun approach, or it's having your individual SDRs, BDRs create these filters, but these filters aren't necessarily driven by intelligence, driven by historical information, maybe of which one of your ICPs are currently working, right? But there's a lot of room for improvement here where you want to look at, is there a need? Is this the right timing? Because is there like a budget? Like for example, the ban process for sales reps, right? So this is something where personally I don't like spam, but I feel like nobody's really trying to solve this problem in a way that reduces spam while still helping businesses solve problems and provide their services to people who need it, right? So that's why this is important to me.
Yeah. Well, God, spam is something that's been around for a long time, and it continues to get, the attention of people, though I think Google and Microsoft and email providers are getting better at capturing that spam, but it is a method. I think email is still one of the best ways to connect with people, or text message, one of the two. Do you do anything outside of email, like, for example, messaging strategies, or is it really tailored towards any one channel?
We are actually not on email yet. We kind
Oh,
of
okay.
built it around social messaging, but we do want to get into the other channels. Our approach is really on the conversion side, the quality side, the AI applied sales intelligence. And so the form of transport, whether that is email, a phone call, or actual, in-person meeting, that's the how part that we want AI to solve. Ultimately, I keep saying AI. Ultimately, we want to drive better conversion rates. Is that using AI? Is that using some form of better, automation that doesn't actually spam people? Ultimately, it's driving the conversion, right? So we just right now, see that AI is much more scalable when it comes to solving large problems, and that's why we kind of focus more on the AI side of things. But
God,
to
okay.
answer your question specifically, we want to be on more channels. We're looking at, for example, WhatsApp, which is very big in Southeast Asia, very big in South America. But the approach is not the same. You don't just reach out to people, right? Like there's a lot of other problems that we want to solve there.
Yeah, gotcha. Makes total sense. When you're reaching out to companies to talk about your product, Copilot, or your service, who cares most about that product? Are you talking to the founders of companies? Are you talking to the sales leaders? Are you talking to the data analysts? Like, who really are you selling to?
It depends on the type of company or the type of industry we're in. Generally speaking, it would be the sales reps or the sales. It's either the sales reps themselves or it's the sales managers because they're looking for a tool that will help them drive better results for their SDRs, right? Or the BDRs, like their business development reps. Yeah.
Got it. And what's the business model?
The business model, we've got three separate models. One is B2C, where we have individuals come and they have certain projects that they want to do some prospecting or network building. Some examples could be someone that's actually looking for sponsors for a conference or maybe sponsors for their podcast. Or it could be from a B2B segment when we talk about the model, then it's for smaller teams. So if we're talking about small to medium sized businesses that have sales teams, have several BDRs, then they'll want multiple licenses for their different BDRs. And then finally, we have a more agency approach or a white label approach. So if you're a marketing agency and you service others, then you could white label Copilot and use it as a way to help your customers prospect or build their networks.
Got it. Really cool. What's the biggest challenge you have currently in the company?
That's a really good question. I feel like every day there's a new big challenge. I think that's tied to competitors in the space. Generally speaking, we're more bootstrapped. For us, it's really tough to compete when your competitors are funded, 20, $30 million, whereas we've been kind of self-funded most of the time. And that approach means that we have to be a bit more conservative. We have to be a bit more resourceful when it comes to trying out different experiments and testing. So I'd like to think that, we're doing our best when it comes to trying to move as quickly as we can. But it is, I would say, one of the major challenges we face is trying to be very focused while still moving quickly and trying out and experimenting on things.
Yeah, I hear you. Welcome to the club. And, when we look at companies that make pivots, there's a lot of left and right choices that go through your decisions of moving the company to a better place. Your story is unique because you started a while back, 10 plus years, and then made a major pivot. What was that transition like for you? And what were some of the takeaways that others can learn from?
Yeah, that was dark times for sure. For us, as I mentioned, we started off in fintech, and we went into this thing, feeling like we had a solution that was amazing, the product was amazing, and that we would see success right away. We signed a large wealth management company at the time, and felt that that meant that we'd be able to start selling to all the financial advisors. They'd all get on. It just didn't turn out that way. What when we actually had conversations with our kind of prospects, the financial advisors, they would tell us about the things that they would want and need, but ultimately when it was built and it came time to actually pay up or like spend money and actually buy the product, it didn't really happen. So this was after I already quit EA and I was working full time. We ended up, running out of money late 2017, trying to do this sort of gather feedback, build things, and then try to sell it. And ultimately, I think our hard work and dedication kind of paid off. We had a local VC invest in us because the founder was interacting with us every day at the incubator that we were working out of. And I think that sort of lifeline gave us the ability to pivot. So we had, through all the interactions with the financial advisors, ultimately had the realization that the one thing that they were most willing to pay for was additional prospects. And because we had already figured out a good way to get this audience of financial advisors, the way we went about it was to validate the sales pitch first before we even had a product. And this was, I think, the biggest change for us was, how do we just start selling this? How do we start validating this before we spend more time building? Because that hasn't really worked in the past. And, I can tell you that this is 100% crediting my co-founder here, because at the time I didn't think it would work. It was something that I felt was very trivial when it came to the solution. And I expressed a lot of doubt about it working. But within the first month, we were seeing 50% close rates. We hit about $50,000 in monthly recurring revenue. And then I became a believer. I was like, okay, I humble pie there. And we kind of set off on this journey to actually deliver the product. The awesome thing about this pivot experience was that because we already validated the pitch, because we validated what the value proposition actually was, building the product was actually very straightforward. It was, okay, we just need to make sure this gets delivered. And that's enough to tide us over until we hit version 2, version 3. And so we had a product within a month, right? And that meant, initially, because we didn't have a product, we tried to do everything by hand, which is, as everyone knows, when you try to throw people at the problem, it's not very scalable. So we had like 50% churn. So 50% close rate, but also 50% month over month churn initially. And then when we introduced the product, we cut that down by half. And then when we did another revision, that we cut that down by half again. And every iteration, as we add more value to the product, we were able to slowly improve on the churn. But yeah, it was a very educational experience for me. As an engineer, it was definitely the realization that the complexity of a problem does not determine the value of the problem that you're trying to solve.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. Well, I know pivots can go a couple different ways. They can take you to the promised land, or they can take you to nowhere's land.
Yeah, for sure.
What's the value proposition today? You've probably gone through a few different iterations, but if I'm a prospect, or you were going to reach out and say, "Hey, Jake, I've got something you should listen to. Let me tell you what it's going to do for your company." What would that sound like?
The value proposition today is about improving the conversion rate that's already in your pipeline. And the way I kind of like to look at this problem, harkening back to the fintech days that we have, is when we look at hedge funds and we look at portfolios that are being shopped around, it's all about generating value on top of or exceeding that of a benchmark. Sometimes people will pick an index. It could be the risk-free rate, depending on the different things that you want to compare. But that extra value that you generate, that's the alpha. And as a quality over quantity company, that's what we want to do. What is your existing process? What is your existing conversion rate? And what can we do to help improve that? So that's the value that we're trying to add. If your average conversion rate is 20% and we can get it to 30%, then we've 50%, we've increased your conversion rate by 50%, right? 50%. So that would be 1.5x of 20%, right? And so the value proposition becomes very simple when you present it like that. What's the pipeline value right now? And we can improve it by X percentage. Let's say, in this case, 50%. And if you've got $1 million in your pipeline, then that's now 1.5 million, because theoretically, if we improve your close rate by 50%, then your pipeline value just improves, right? So that's the value proposition.
Talk to us about your company. What's your aspirations for 2025 in terms of the company, the size, where you're at, and where you're growing?
Yeah, so as a company, we're relatively small right now. We've got about 50 employees. We're bootstrapped. Our revenue is at around 7-8 million annual run rate. And a lot of the things that I mentioned are features and products that we've already built, but it's still very much tied to our existing sort of channel that we're in, which is in messaging. Where we want to be by 2025 is, integrated into CRMs, into sales processes, driving higher conversion rates for people, for sales teams, and also providing a more sort of full suite solution to specific niches. One of the major customer segments we have right now are financial advisors, so I think that's where we would start. But eventually, we'd branch that into the other segments that have a good fit with what we have to offer right now, based on the data that we have and the models that we've built.
That's great. I like the fact you have a niche you're focused on. When you talk about a company, oftentimes there's technical breakthroughs, but many times there's personal breakthroughs too. As a leader, give us some insights about one or two breakthroughs that you've gone through as you have evolved as a leader.
Yeah, so I think one big sort of conference, and then this is again, I think I felt like I think I had a really good sort of dynamic with my co-founder, and it drove a lot of that personal development. One of the conversations I remember us having as we were kind of walking through Stanley Park is this talk about how, as the company scales, how do the founders scale, and the need for founders to scale together with the company. Otherwise, your company's capped at wherever the founders are, or you kind of have to replace the founders, right? So I think that was a very big step for me. It seems really obvious, but it's not necessarily something people acknowledge or even consider or think about, you know. And so it's one of those things where, as a company, back then we were 5-6 people, and now we're 10x. Am I in my 10x where I was before? I mean, I don't think I'm exactly 10x, but I'd like to think that I'm much further along and ahead when it comes to, how to be a leader that can inspire his team, but also the experience of understanding what to focus on, such as not coding anymore. I think I've had a lot of my engineers tell me to stay out of the code base now, but all of that was, I think, really important and part of my sort of transformation as an individual. The other one was stepping into the CEO role from being a CTO. I think that was also a big shift in the different skills that I needed to focus on, and the different areas that I needed to spend my time on. That was also a very big shift for me.
Yeah, that's great. It can also be a blind spot. You're not really sure how you have to evolve or when you need to evolve, and unless you're pressed into doing it or someone calls you out on it. So we hear a lot that, companies ask their founders to have coaches that can be there to kind of keep them on track or maybe see things they're not seeing, and just personal development. Sometimes you just need, a shoulder to cry on once in a while.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah.
it's good to hear some of those breakthroughs. As you look at 2025, what's on the roadmap that you're excited about from a technical perspective?
We are adding additional channels. I think that's really exciting. The other part of it, as I mentioned, is integrations into existing sales processes. That's going to open up a lot, I think, of potential and opportunity for us. I want to be able to pitch that pipeline value thing that I mentioned to you. To be honest, we're not quite there yet, but I can see it already. It's something that is very tangible, and that's going to, I think, be really exciting for us next year.
Yeah. Last question for you. As a company, hiring is challenging. You have to find the right people at the right time with the right culture fit and attitude. What are some of the roles? Maybe you can share this for anybody that might want to apply to a job at your company in the future. What are some of the roles that you have open that you'd like to have people join over the next 6-12 months?
Great question. Right now, I'm looking for a COO, as I mentioned. Actually, I don't think I mentioned it, but yeah, like I implied it. My co-founder is not involved in the day-to-day now. His passion is still fintech. So I'm looking for a partner in this. That's somebody that we're actually actively looking for right now. We're an AI company, so we're always looking for very smart data scientists, machine learning engineers, etc. So these are always positions that will always be open. I think it's very much if there's a talent and it makes sense, then we bring them in. If not, maintain the relationship, because these positions will open up, right, as we grow as a company. In RevOps, looking for sales leaders, looking for people to help, like, that believe in the vision and can help sell this vision. That's also really, really helpful for us.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Jesse, I want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I think it's fascinating. I love the brand name. I think you got a good product that's going to not just help a lot of companies, but if you can tell someone you're going to convert their prospects into higher close rates, I mean, why would you not want to at least look at that or explore it? So I think you're onto something really cool there. I want to thank you for joining. I also want to thank the listeners for listening today. It means a lot to me that you spent your time with us. My name is Jake Aaron Villarreal, the host of the show. Signing off for now, but can't wait to catch up with you all in the next episode. Until then, Jesse, listeners, take care. If you like what we're doing, don't forget to subscribe. Leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen, and follow us on YouTube, where we go behind the scenes to learn what it takes to be a startup founder.